People say revenge is a dish best served cold, and that in life things are, quote, an eye for an eye. In modern society, that holds true, especially within our government. You see, our government fully funds and endorses the premeditated murder of criminals. Today, I'm going to be informing you on the Federal Death Penalty Act of 1994, or the FDPA, and then I'm going to be weighing some pros and some cons. I've done hours of research on this topic. I've also written multiple papers on the death penalty in general, dating as early as middle school. Common misconception is that the death penalty only affects felons, criminals, or the inmates and their families. That is not true. Millions of taxpayers' dollars are put into the death penalty every year, and the death penalty helps keep crime rates down. Just like everything else, the FDPA has a unique origin story. So why was it established? It was established in order to provide a uniform procedure to apply capital punishments and prosecutions under federal felonies, specifically included in the congressional statute, BLAS 2014. BLAS is a University of Puerto Rico and a New York University graduate. This act meant that Puerto Ricans were a lot more eligible for the death penalty. But why is Puerto Rico in the mix? It's because we had control, legislatively, we had control over Puerto Rico at this time. The FDPA was not expressly extended by Congress to be applied in Puerto Rico, nor has there been any referendum or procedure alike to receive this consensus from the people of Puerto Rico. This ultimately would mean that the Congress had deliberately infringed its compact with Puerto Rico by applying the FDPA to Puerto Rico without the consent of its people as an act of unilateral alterations to the Puerto Rican Commonwealth Constitution. Puerto Rico was not happy with what was happening in their country. But none of this means that the FDPA was necessarily a good thing. It caused tension, a lot of it, in Puerto Rico. Sorting out the relationship between Puerto Rico and federal law remains a difficult, if not maddening, quandary. John Morton, 2001. He's a University of Massachusetts, Boston, and Albany Law School graduate. This also meant that Puerto Ricans were a lot more likely to receive the death penalty than Americans were. Not only did this leave tension on Puerto Rico, it left tension on America as well. America was often found fighting with itself over what to do about the act in general and how to handle Puerto Rico. But there's always two sides to a coin. There was some good that came out of this act. It was more fair. That would have enabled trial judges to impanel 2 district juries for capital cases, a regular jury for the guilty phase and a death qualified jury. Harvard Law Review, 2005. This also meant for more consistency. If there was a retrial, and now the death penalty as a punishment was in question, the same trial was there for settlement would come back to handle things in terms of the death penalty. There was also less bias. If 2 people were being convicted for the same crime, there would be 2 trials, separate from one another, so that the trials wouldn't overlap and influences would be made. There's a good and bad in everything. In conclusion, the FDPA is an interesting concept with many pros and cons. So, is an eye for an eye worth it? When the eye isn't an eye here at risk, but rather human life?